Hello, students. It is I, the great Thor, here to assist you in preparing for your test 7. So let us begin. Question 1. If lines are parallel, what happens with their slopes? So what do we know about parallel lines? We know that parallel lines are like so, and as such, they never touch. So what does this mean about their slopes? Well, if I take a line that's parallel, and notice if I tilt slightly and bring it over, it would eventually cross. These would eventually cross. You may be thinking to yourself, well, what if I tilt it backwards? Would it not touch? The truth is, it would touch, it would just touch in the backside. The only way these lines do not touch is if they have the same slope. Because as they shoot off to the left and to the right, if they have the same slope, they will never touch. And as such, the only feasible solution to this problem is that the slopes are the same. Let us move on. If lines are perpendicular, what happens with their slopes? Well, we know exactly what happens to their slopes. Perpendicular lines form 90-degree angles, but more importantly, they have opposite reciprocal slopes. We know that they cannot be the same, and the opposite is to trick you. It's not just opposite, but it's opposite reciprocal. Let's move on. Now, the next question. If the absolute value of x is equal to -5, what must the absolute value of x be? Well, to answer this question, you have to answer a very simple question, which is, can distance be negative? Can it be? Can it be negative? Of course not. Distances are only positive, and as such, the solution is no solution. Let's move on. What if it's a positive slope? Then what? Well, then we know that the absolute value of x can be two answers. It can be x could be 6 or -6. Because when we look at distance, and that is what the absolute value is, the distance from 0, you can go 6 to the right and you can go 6 to the left, and they both would have a distance of 6. And as such, the answer is 6 or -6. Let's move on. Slopes of parallel lines are what? Slopes of parallel lines. Well, if we just talked about it, we know that parallel lines have the same slope, right? So their slopes have to be what? They have to be identical. Remember also in the word parallel, there are two L's. And if I took these two L's, and if I ever so decided to take them and turn them, what would happen? If I turn them, they would form equal signs, because that is what they are. They are equal, the slopes, that is. Let's move on. Slopes of perpendicular lines, once more, have opposite reciprocal slopes. Let's keep going. We just answered that question. What slope is parallel to 4? And again, I cannot stress this enough. The two L's, if we take them and we rotate them, let's try that again. If we rotate the L's, they form equal signs. So the slopes have to be the same. If the slopes are the same, what must the slope be? Clearly, it must be 4. Very good. Let's move on. If they are perpendicular, then they have what we call opposite reciprocal slopes. So what does opposite reciprocal mean? Well, we know that opposite reciprocal means that the slopes, opposite means that if it's positive, the new slope will be negative. Reciprocal means you take numerator and denominator and you flip them. So our new slope is -8/5. Let's move on. Number 9. What do we know of these slopes? Well, we know that the equation is in y equals mx plus b, and if it is in y equals mx plus b, m is the slope. And if m is the slope, then there must be the slopes are 5/7 and 5/7, which happen to be the same numbers, so they must be parallel. In this one, what do we notice about the slopes? Again, y equals mx plus b. I will write it again, just in case you don't recall the formula. And from this, we know that m is the slope. So we know the slopes are 6 and -6. So what are they? Well, 6 and -6 are opposites. But are they reciprocal? Of course not. That's such a silly question. They cannot be reciprocal. They are the same number. They are both 6. And as such, they cannot be perpendicular. They cannot be parallel because they are not the same. So they are neither. And that is sufficient. That is okay to have neither as our answer. Let us move on. And what say we about this question? Well, again, in case you are curious, y equals mx plus b is in slope-intercept form. And again, m is the slope. So we know the slope here to be -2/3 and 3/2. Let's write them. What do we know of the signs? Well, clearly the signs are different, which means they are opposite. Different means opposite. And if I switch numerator and denominator, well, we have a word for that. It is reciprocal. And they have opposite reciprocal. And as we learned earlier, opposite reciprocal means that the lines must be perpendicular. And thus, the answer is perpendicular. Let's move on. A line is parallel to y equals 2x minus 7. Look, it is our old friend y equals mx plus b once more. Whoever made this review really wants you to know y equals mx plus b. I don't know why I just laughed. Okay, I also don't know why I wrote plus 7. It is minus 7. Let me write minus 7. Well, we know once more that m is the slope, so m is 2. And we also know parallel lines have equal slopes. So what must be the answer? Well, clearly it's 2. Let's move on. Line is perpendicular. Oh, look. They are not only the same problem, except talking about perpendicular versus parallel, but they have the same equation. So if y equals mx plus b, you really need to know that. Then we clearly know the slope still is 2. We know perpendicular is opposite, so if this is plus, the new slope will be minus. Note 2 is 2/1, so the reciprocal is to flip it, and it is 1/2. But negative. Very good. Let's move on. Finally, a worthy challenge for the Thor. Let's see what to do here. We know that we have the equation 10x plus 8y equals 16. We have another equation 5y equals 4x minus 15. So the first question is, what do I need to do to figure out if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Well, one way to do it. That's right. Y equals mx plus b. We must put it in this format. Let us put this first one in that format. So I will first move what? I hope you said minus 10x. Because the goal is to get y by itself. Notice y here is by itself. It must be by itself. And here we are. And then what? And then what indeed? We must divide by 8, for we are multiplying 8 by y. And if I divide one side by 8, I must divide all of them by 8. Every single last one of them. And when I say them, I refer to terms. So we are here. And of course, we realize we can reduce. We must reduce. These are both divisible by 2. And over here, 16 divided by 8. I hope you realize it's 2. And I hope you also realize the slope is -5/4. What about the second problem? What could I do here? Well, all I have to do is divide by 5. This one is more or less already there. And look at our slope. It is now 4/5. This one is negative 5/4. This one is 4/5. So clearly it is not parallel. It is either neither or perpendicular. And we see we flip. This is 5/4. This is 4/5. That is called reciprocal. We see this is negative and this is positive. This is called opposite. This opposite reciprocal action is called perpendicular. Now, one more point to be made here that is so important, for it will make your life easier. This is in what is called standard form, ax plus by equals c. And when it is in standard form, m is negative a over b. And if that is the case, a is 10 and b is 8. And so I can simply say it is negative a is 10, b is 8, and so it reduces to 5, negative 5/4 once more. So you do not need to do this activity of isolating y. If you recall that standard form is ax plus by equals c. Yes, this is called standard form. Let me not be lazy and write it out. Then we know that m is equal to negative a over b, and we can just simply plug in the numbers into the formula to derive the slope to be negative 5/4. This will be incredibly important as we progress. Speaking of progressing, number 15. Are the lines parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Well, here we know that we have an x equals graph. And whenever you have x equals, let me draw it out. We have x equals 4. Let's say this is x equals 4, and this is x equals negative 6. What we see here is that if we have negative 4 and negative 6, these are lines that go up and down. Remember, it is an x. We will go up and down with an x like I will with my hammer towards evil math problems. Up and down is for x. And if they are going up and down like such, would they be perpendicular? Clearly not. Would they be parallel? Obviously, yes. Remember, again, the word parallel has two L's that are going up and down, just like these two lines are going up and down. Let's move on. Oh, look at this one. This is saying x is 1, y is negative 8. So clearly, if x is going up and down, then y must be going left and right. And if we have one going up and down, the other going left and right, they form that obvious 90-degree angle, which means they must be perpendicular. I was struggling to say that word, perpendicular. Let's move on. Ah, yes. Now we are talking about correlations. Describe the association between the lanes rented and the number of people bowling. Well, we can see clearly there is a general trend of going up here. The mighty Thor struggles to draw lines here. Let's try that again. As we can see here, there's a line that goes here. This is not worthy of the Thor's lines. Thor can do better. There's our line. There's our line indeed. The line has a positive slope because we are going up. Like the Thor. Going up to save the mortals of Earth. Which means it has a positive, linear meaning a line, association. There's your answer. Let's move on. Describe the association here. Well, here we have points here, 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 here. It's like the cosmos as I fly through the cosmos at night, sometimes when I need to get some air. What do I realize here? Well, these points are scattered. They are scattered all over the place. This is no correlation here. So linear and negative? No. Linear and positive? This is garbage. Non-linear and no association? That sounds fantastic. Non-linear and positive? No. Non-linear negative. In other words, when you have points scattered all over the place, there is no correlation. Let's move on. Describe the association here. Well, notice that these points gradually go down. And if they go down, we're going to say that they are linear, and hence they are going to be linear and negative. In this test, very important to realize, there will be no question that if there is a relationship, it will be linear. We will not have things like exponential, because we have not discussed that. Let's move on. True or false correlation implies causation. Well, clearly, from many talks, we know that this to be false. This is insanity at its greatest level. Let's move on. Which equation represents a line which is parallel? Well, we know y again equals, that's right, mx plus b. We also know m to be the slope, which is negative 3 over 2. And if the lines are parallel, what else do we know here? The slopes are the same. So my goal will be to find the slope here that is parallel. Well, recall earlier we had mentioned m equals negative a over b if it is in standard form. So it is my task to find an a that is 3, a b that is 2, and I will be worthy of my answer. So here a is 3 and b is 2. This is worthy of the answer, for it will be negative 3 over 2. I wish that to make sense to you. Let's move on. Which equation represents a line which is perpendicular? So, once more, we notice that this is in y equals mx plus b, the slope to be 5/7. And if it is reciprocal, it must have a slope of negative 7 over 5. For perpendicular means opposite reciprocal slope. And if we have a slope of negative 7 over 5, then what does that mean? Well, m is equal to negative a over b. So that means a must be 7. So b must be 5. So I am looking for an a of 7, a b of 5. And that occurs here. Let us move on. Which equation represents a line parallel to the line x plus 8y equals 56? Here they try to trick you, but it is the same process as before. The only difference is they are putting it in ax plus by equals c, which is called standard form. So I already know my slope, which is negative a over b, must be negative 1 over 8. And so I look at my answer choices, which are all written in y equals mx plus b. This problem is actually trying to be nice to us, as difficult as it seems. And we know the slope, if it is parallel, must be the same. I am looking for the one that is negative 1 over 8. That is this one here. It is worthy of the answer. Let us move on. Number 24. It is the same question. It is giving me an a, it is giving me a b. I will substitute into negative a over b and realize my slope is negative 3 over 1. Remember, the leading coefficient here is 1. And what does the mighty Thor do after scratching his nose? I actually want to pick it. That was too much information. I apologize. What do I wish to do? I wish to look here for the slope of negative 3. That is right here. Easy enough. Let's move on. Oh, parallel to the x-axis. Perhaps I should draw a grid. There is one line. There is another. We call this x, we call this y. If it is parallel, it is a line that goes left to right. if it is parallel to the x-axis. Something like this. Let's just assume that it is parallel. It seems to be a little off, but that's close enough. What do we know about horizontal lines? It is like when you are hit by Thor's hammer. You lay down and take a nap. And hence it is y equals some number. Just a number. No x's, just a number. So which one is the answer? This is the only one that is y equals just a number, the number being -7. Yes, the Thor is aware that -7 is down here, but the number does not have to be negative. It could be positive. But for clarity's sake, the Thor will erase all this. And again, the Thor enjoys speaking in third person. Shall we move on? I think so. Similar question. I will draw an XY grid first to help assist with the visualization. Here we are. We are looking, again, this is X and this is Y. So now we are looking at this right here. We are looking thus for a value that goes up and down. As you recall, this is when Thor hits things with his hammer. And so we are looking for an X equals graph. And X equals 2 would make sense because it is the only one that is X and only X. Very good. Do not get confused with this answer choice. This has a Y. We want just X. Just like in this one, we only want Y. Let us move on. Solve the absolute value problem. Yes, let's solve it. All we must do here is isolate the absolute value. So what would be the first move? Well, if you are like the Thor, the first move would be to subtract the 5. For the goal is to get the absolute value by itself. -3 minus 5 is -8. And then, because our goal is to isolate the absolute value, we must divide through by -1. And the absolute value of x minus 4 is 8. And from here, we will branch this off into 2 worlds. One in which x minus 4 equals the 8. And another where x minus 4 is equal to -8. And we will solve both of these. And upon solving these, we arrive to x being 12 and x being -4. And these, my friends, are the solutions. Remember, we can always substitute these values back into check. So if I plug in 12 here, 12 minus 4 is 8. Absolute value of 8 is 8. -8 plus 5 is -3. That is correct. And if I substitute in -4, -4 minus 8 is -8. We know when absolute values occur, we must become positive. 8, I don't know why I just laughed. -8 plus 5 is -3. And that would also be correct. Glorious. Glorious indeed. And those are my answers. Let's move on. Next. We are going to say x is 2. We will substitute in x is 2, and we will have the absolute value of 2 plus 4. We know absolute value is positive, so it will be 2 plus 4, which is 6. And hence y is 6. There is our answer. We are ready to move on. To emphasize the point in the next problem, we are given the absolute value of -7. And there it is important to realize, once more, the absolute value is like when we do math, positive. And so we have 7 minus 5, which is 2. And there is our answer. Shall we move on? I think so. And the last problem of the evening. The absolute value of 6 minus 3c. How shall we approach this, my friends? Well, if you recall at the end of this problem, which was far more complicated, we branched it off into 2 scenarios at the end. Once the absolute value is isolated, we say it is the positive 8, and then it is the -8, and then we shall solve. So what should I do here? The absolute value is by itself, as is the 14. I hope you had said 6 minus 3c will equal to the 14, as will 6 minus 3c equal negative 14. And then we will solve. Let us subtract 6 from both sides. Negative 3c is the 8. Over here we shall do the same. And negative 3c equals negative 20. Is it our concern that these numbers will turn out to be ugly? No. For some of the villains that Thor must face are not pretty. No, not pretty. Just like Thor's handwriting. Not pretty. Notice here, a negative and a negative yields a positive value. I do not know why there is a squiggly line right there. And here, my friends, is the end of the review. I sure hope that this was helpful. And remember, if you need help, you may always call on the Thor. Goodbye and farewell.